Welcome back, and today we are having two guests on for the first time. I'm very excited. We have Natasha again. Also, congratulations, and we have Young Investor on again. Again, congratulations. I'm thankful to have you guys on today, and we have a pretty serious topic. So before we get started, for those who don't know you guys, please introduce yourself. Natasha, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Natasha Vincent. I live in Montreal, Canada. Um, I don't know, how else would I introduce myself? I'm in the healthcare space, kind of delving into the YouTube space as well, slowly but surely. And I'm happy to have this conversation with you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to have you here. And Young Investor, introduce yourself.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Um, my name is Trajan Moore, but I go by Young Investor. I'm from Houston, Texas, and I'm currently in school right now. I'm in school to become a financial planner, and ultimately, I hope to become a financial planner and help people get the outcomes that they're looking for in terms of their financial goals. And it is a pleasure to be on your podcast today, Antonio, to have this great conversation.
Thank you guys again. So, I believe I wanted to discuss a more like a serious topic and sensitive topic when it comes to me. And some of the things I've been hearing about a lot is, people people like associating like the sins of their fathers and the things I've done in the past that they're still being held accountable like today, right? So, oh, sorry about that. Um, in our community, we have a lot of fathers who are like absent or they're like in prison or they're dead. And my question is like, how much accountability does this generation have to the next one? Because we speak a lot about, in America, like America has sins that they have to reckon with. We have to have these struggle sessions and people have to acknowledge like the harm that was happening, but there's actively harm happening right now in this generation that people are actively participating in, and we never really hear about accountability when it comes to that. Like there's certain things that go on as far as like policies or certain like ideologies when it comes to certain cultures where certain things are acceptable as long as like someone who looks like you is perpetrating that on you, if that makes sense. And it's not really headline news. You have situations where you have if a white police officer kills a black man, it's a tragedy. Everybody's gonna march in the streets. But then if a black man kills another black man, that's just Pookie shooting Ray Ray, and that just is what it is. So a lot of times we hear about accountability and the sins of our fathers when it comes to like a macro historical sense. But how does that pertain to what goes on in our community now? You know what I mean? What do you guys think?
Who wants to go first?
Yeah. What do you guys think? I'm gonna jump in. Sorry.
mm, I mean, I think there definitely is an impact on a micro level. So we're talking about on each individual family that has these negative outcomes. So you mentioned absentee fathers, fathers who might, be involved in violent crimes. And then, that leads to potentially fathers who, if they're alive after making those violent crimes or committing those violent crimes, end up in jail, right? Are those the three categories we're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So on a micro level, there's definitely an impact on the household and on the extended family. It's like this ripple effect, right? So it has these ramifications that go from the micro level then to the macro level and affect not only the cultural community, so the Black community, and there's, different definitions for, who is and is not included in the Black community, but ultimately it affects the entire community. So it's not something to be taken lightly. A lot of the things that are involved in those three factors, again, absentee fathers, men involved in violent crime, men ending up in jail, a lot of those have like easy mitigation factors, right? Like they can be reduced. So it's a matter of us working on that as a community so that we don't affect our families and then ultimately the community.
I feel that. I'm a son of a person who did like 18 years in prison, right? Who was sentenced to felony murder. He was involved in a robbery gone wrong, and someone got killed, and it was very close to like Christmas time, and so it kind of like reminds me around this time that like there's a lot of people who struggle with like not having a person in their life, and they don't understand like the consequences of what they're doing in the moment. And then later on, there's ramifications that extend, like you said, the ripple effect that go on just beyond like the right now. So I kind of find it hard when people say they really care about like their community or their culture, but certain things are always advocated for that are just like really negative and toxic, right? Like I don't know why we don't see the same like outrage when the murder rate in Chicago was so crazy. Or I mean, even Portland. I'm not even speaking about Chicago. I live in Portland, Oregon, and we have one of the highest murder rates for black men, and we have a percentage of our population in Oregon is like 3% black, and it's pretty much all in Portland. It's all like in the northeast area, or like the southeast area. We're all congregated so close together, and it's so hard to think that you don't know the people that you're actively beefing with. You know what I mean? Because we all go to the same schools, we all have cousins together, like everybody, because people do tend to you know um marry or have kids with people of their own race. We are kind of segregated, you know what I'm saying? So we're all in one area. It's kind of hard to believe that you're not seeing that impact when like you're actively killing someone's, like that's your cousin's baby dad, or that's your cousin's husband, or that's someone you knew from high school. It's just so weird that those things are celebrated, and yet when somebody who has authority kills somebody, it's a tragedy. But when we do it, it doesn't have the same impact. And what do you think, young investor?
That's You brought up a great point, but that is true, and I look at it the same way that you do, Antonio. But I think the problem when it comes down to is that a lot of us in the community are programmed to think a certain way, right? Which is this liberal mindset, and so when you look at those things, people are gonna say, oh, I often hear this people say, oh, ninjas die every day, b, something like that. And that's because we're trained a certain way to think a certain way, and a lot of us, we're not really, well, I don't want to say we don't really care about the community, but we only put out certain energy when it fits the narrative. Meaning, like you said, when somebody with authority goes and shoots a black person, then the community gets riled up, and we take it to the streets, and we protest. But nobody does that when a fellow black man gets killed by another black brother. And like I said before, I just think that has to do with a lot of social programming, a lot of things that are taking place from a political standpoint. And until we're able to solve that problem, I think we're still going to continue to see this perpetuous cycle where a lot of people aren't really caring, about what's going on in our community. We're only worried about things that fit the narrative, such as authority killing a black man, and having this belief that America's ultimately racist against black people.
Do you think that people actually really care other other people outside their community? I mean, you could have like a slight but do you think that people like in New York really care about people in California the way they say they do? It's kind of hard to empathize with people, or really have a deep feeling for people. No. And I mean, I know this thing is like consistently told to us, like when someone dies, and maybe we all feel that because we've all have like fathers or sons that look like that person, and that does make sense. But it to get numb, right? Like there people stop being a person. They kind of just become a statistic, and then it's kind of like, well, it is what it is. Like hey, America's gonna America, you know what I mean? And for me, it's sad because we're told by these role models that like we're all black and we're all in it together. But then when it comes down to like really helping our community, who really does that? And like when you hear things like, hey, let's police our own community. Now don't even know their neighbors. You know what I mean? So how does that even work anymore? Like nobody can check anybody anymore. You know what I mean? Where it's not like, hey, you're Mrs. Johnson's son. I know how you guys move, and your dad wouldn't like that. You know what I mean? Like you don't have that sense of community where someone can just pull someone else's collar and say, "Hey, we got to fix these situations." Now it's kind of like we're all entities and we don't really care about each other the way we say we do. So my thing is like, I kind of feel like if you want to have like in something that isn't directly affected to you, then I think you need to have some kind of responsibility too, right? Like if you want to have being, then let's also take responsibility for the negative aspects. And um, if you don't want to take responsibility, point of worrying about someone who you don't really care about, you know what I mean? So what do you think, Natasha? Am I off base?
Well, I think it goes back to community building. Like I think about my current work in the nonprofit sector, and I work in the nonprofit sector on purpose because I've seen the good that it can do. My parents also worked in the nonprofit sector in and out when I was younger. So it was nice to see, like, oh, like my parents can have an impact on, people who look like me, because they were specifically working in the Black community. I don't specifically work in the Black community, although what I do impacts the Black community as well in Canada. So yeah, I think community building is where a lot of that can start. It's almost like a two-pronged approach. I keep doing like this kind of thing, but that ripple effect really, I think, applies here, right? So if you've got some work happening at that macro level, like I was saying before, at the community level, you've got different community organizations with their own sets of values, perhaps like the church, but also maybe secular community organizations as well, but culturally based. Having activities, bringing the community together, doing things together, embellishing the neighborhood in tangible ways. Like I know there used to be a lot of projects back in the day, and it still happens, I guess, like making sure that whenever graffiti goes up, and mostly tags, so not beautiful graffiti, right? Because there's nice graffiti, but there's also like just the tags from different gangs and stuff, but that those get washed as quickly as possible off of buildings, because as a city visually disintegrates, so does the community, right? And the way that the community acts. So when you tackle that tangibly and quickly, you also affect the community in a positive way. And then from a family perspective, there's different ways that you can tackle that, but it starts with the family and the family's own values as well. But it definitely is a two-pronged approach. And I think a lot of it can be helped with community-based initiatives, community organizations, and I do include the church in that as well.